Hi, I'm Phil Dispenza, and this is Collecting, Investing, or Somewhere in Between. This is going to be a series of videos that will deal with different types of collectibles and maybe specific items in that genre that might be good investments. But it's going to be a lot of information, and I'm probably going to weigh more in on the collecting aspect versus the investing. Um, but you know, how do we get into the whole collecting in the first place? Most people are exposed during their childhood um, to various different types of collectibles. They watch TV, kids, you're a little kid, you watch cartoons and TV shows and things. Or you go to the movies and you see the most popular movies, superheroes and things. And you start acquiring these items, Christmas time, a little kid gets presents and stuff. And so, you'll get some comic books, you'll be reading comic books, you enjoy them. You'll be playing board games or card games or video games, and you're enjoying. You get buy cards like trading cards, sports cards, non-sports cards. When I was a little kid, uh, we took a lot of our stickers and put them all over our dresser. Uh, I don't know if my mother ever cared if she said anything that she didn't say to us. But I actually have pictures. Maybe I'll throw a picture up of the dresser. I still have the dresser. Um, but you acquire all these things, and you're living these things while you're a kid. You're enjoying it. It's like, hey, this is great and stuff. And for me, my first collectible was stamps, where I actually save things. But as a kid, normal kid, you're not gonna keep things in nice condition. I know a few people who actually do or did when they were young, but that's probably more in the rarity. So, as a kid, you play with your stuff, you destroy it. You still might still have it, or maybe, it's a little beat up, but it's not going to be pristine. You open your action figures, you play with them and stuff. So, it's not until usually, I'd say, teenage years, you might consider, once you start collecting, you see other people saving things, you might want to start saving things. And again, it might be like comic books, you bag and board them or something. But video games, you're going to open, you're going to play them. I spent a lot of my teenage years playing video games. But it's not until you graduate college, I always say, where you have that extra income. You might pay your student loans. Um, but then where do you spend your extra money? Most people don't move out right away. They'll live with their parents and they have lots of extra money. So you might buy a car, but you're not going to buy a house. So personally, I actually collected. I had stamps, and I actually stopped at probably around 13. I only collected for like 3, 4 years. Baseball cards and stuff I had purchased, and sports cards. I took my Star Wars stickers and King Kong stickers. And I threw them on my dresser when I was a little kid. I played with my action figures, of course. We had Mego dolls and stuff, Star Trek, Planet of the Apes, the superhero ones. And comic books I started collecting in '84, and those I actually begged, board, saved. Try to keep it in good condition. But you read them, and usually read them once and put them away because every month you get tons more. It wasn't until the late '80s. I think it was about '87. This girl in my school, her brother was dealing in baseball cards, and I never thought about dealing at all. At this time, you're a teenager. Most teenagers don't deal in, collectibles. So her brother came over our house. We brought out all our old baseball cards, and he's sitting there looking at the corners, and he pulls out the McGuire rookies and some older '70s tops rookie cards we had, and we sold. I don't remember how many cards, maybe 8 to 10 cards, and he gave us, I believe, $80, and I'm like, oh wow, that's great. And I knew about Overstreet for comic books, but I didn't know there was a price guide for baseball cards and stuff. And of course, that was Beckett. So we sold our cards, and the next thing I know, I started buying more cards because I had stopped in '85. I didn't buy '86. I didn't buy '87. You only have so much money as a teenager, and you got to choose, pick and choose. Do you want to buy cards? You want to buy comics? You want to buy video games? Whatever it is. You want to go out with your friends, go to the movies. So you could pick and choose usually. But it wasn't until like 1988, like that following year, um, I got contacted by someone I knew. He had a comic book collection. It was the very first collection I actually purchased. It was like 1,000 comic books, $150, and I'm like, oh, great. So I would save my money from birthdays, graduations, Christmas, wherever, from family. They'd always give you money. After a while, when you get older, you get money instead of gifts, and then you could just buy whatever you need or want. So I purchased this big collection, and I'm looking through it, and there's a local comic book store by me, and I said, okay, I don't want these comic books, so I bring a few up to him. He gives me some money. I'm like, oh, that's great, and I'm like, okay, he doesn't want a lot of these. I might have a couple of hundred books I don't want. So now what do I do? So I bought he had Beckett's and stuff. And I bought Beckett's, and that summer of '88. I had garage sales, and I'd put little flyers out, and I'd show comic books, and I'd show baseball cards and stuff. And mostly kids would come over to the house, and I was doing this almost like on a weekly basis. So I put out the comics, I priced them according to the Overstreet, because back then everybody used Overstreet, and put the baseball cards based on Beckett and things like that. So I put them out and started making some money. So I'd buy boxes of cards, I'd save some for myself, and then what am I going to do with all the doubles? Oh, I got so and so, Mark Grace double rookie or something. Roberto Clemente, not Roberto Alomar, and put them out and say, okay, yeah. Then Ken Griffey Jr. in '89, but so the garage sales were great, but there's no internet at this time, and what choices did I have? So we started doing a small flea market at one of the local churches once a month, and you bring your stuff down there, and make a little more money, and what do you do with that money? You repurchase stuff. Just keep reinvesting, and so what I did is I graduated from college, looking for a job, computer programmer, and very disappointed because at the time in 1993 they were literally laying off everybody. So I had a hard time, but since I was doing this part-time, I convinced my father, can I get some money? And I opened up my own shop. So in the mid-90s, for about 3.5 years, I had my own store, and talk about a lot of work, but it's fun. So it was about 95, 96, which I'll discuss more in the Atari video. I'm doing video games, but I'm going to do one specific right on the Atari 2600. One of my customers, a 16-year-old kid, comes in Saturday morning. He goes, oh, look, I bought this Atari with games in garage sale for $20. And it was an Atari 7800, which I didn't know, because once Atari 2600 passed, I went into ColecoVision, then I went to the Commodore 64 computer, and then I went to IBM computer. So, I abandoned the usually cartridge-based system by the mid 80s. So he brings in the Atari 7800. There's like 23 games, and he goes, I want these 3 games. You can have the rest. Just give me my $20 back, and I just get the 3 games, and you can keep the Atari. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I bring the thing home, and I never thought about Atari since like 82, 83 maybe. So, that's like 13 years later, and I'm like, okay, connected it, had my friends there, and started playing the games. And you got Space Invaders, and you got Pac-Man, which we know Pac-Man wasn't that great, but relive it, and Pitfall and Adventure, and the light bulb went off, boom, right above my head. And I said, if I feel this way, I'm 25, 26 years old. If I feel this way, other people my age will probably also feel this way if they see or, play in Atari. And like, there's that nostalgia collecting. So I connected the Atari, and I said, okay, we'll play, have some fun, and, go through all the different cartridges. So I had no clue. And the only internet by then was like news groups, or you had to call somebody's actual phone line. It's called the bulletin board system. I'm dating myself. Anyway, so um, so I had, I said to the customers, I go in and I tell them, look, I'm looking for some old video games. And, somebody would say, okay, I have, Atari and stuff. And then I'd go to garage sales and I'd start finding this stuff. And it was cheap. I mean, a quarter a game, if that. And you buy systems and stuff, like that guy, that kid, $20 and stuff. So I started I had duplicates, but I had no clue on value. So I'm like, oh, Pac-Man, that was a popular game. So I put that for $1. Little loose cartridges. You didn't find too much in the box at the time because I just started. And so I put them out, and then the customer's like, oh, I have that. And I said, well, bring it in. I'll trade, give you trade credit for the store. And then I discovered all of a sudden there's all these different video game systems that I never heard of. And then I'm looking on news groups. That was the internet, of course, to find information. And I started buying some games from somebody in Canada, and he'd have these auctions, and he'd put, okay, here's the game, current price, nothing, or current price $1.50 or something. And I would bid with him, and then I'd be purchasing other stuff than Atari. And next thing I know, I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different systems that some of them I heard of, some of them I had. And so, I got heavily into video games. So I purchased, put them out, and, found out there was a price guide out there on video games. And I'm looking through and I'm like, I didn't know there's hundreds and hundreds of Atari games. So, it was great. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start collecting all this stuff. So I'm going to go into, we'll get to the video games in the next episode, especially Atari, because there's a lot just for the Atari itself. Right now, there's a big investment push for vintage video games. So I figured that's going to be 2 or 3 episodes itself. But, why we're going to go cut the collecting off and go into the investing. Why do people invest? Usually, they think they can make money. And you watch these TV commercials all the time, pushing gold or pushing silver or, Ameritrade, stock market and stuff. But a lot of times when the stock market is soft, people go into collectibles. And, comic books are a big thing. Everybody knows them. But, why would you put money into something? And you got to think of why you're going to purchase something, and, think about storage and things, because there's a lot to in investing and collecting that people don't think about. You think, okay, I bought 50 comic books. 50 comic books don't take up much room. But, when you purchase a collection like I did in 1988, 1,000 comic books, that's like over 3 long boxes. And, if I've been collecting for years, I probably only really had, I think by 1988, I think I had about 12, 13 long boxes, which to me as a, teenager who didn't really have much of a job, it's a good amount of books to have, but they take up room. So when you think about collecting and investing, especially investing, because collecting, you usually have a passion for it. You enjoy it. You want to have it, or you have the quote need to have it. So investing, you got to think, okay, where am I going to put these things? So if you invest in something like stamps or coins, you're not going to take up much room. Stamp album, it's a book for a shelf, and you can have, thousands and thousands of stamps worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, all in one little book. Whereas, comic books, again, a long box is, 2 feet long, holds 300 books, and, you stack up, 20 boxes, 50 boxes, and you start collecting. And you have to pick and choose sometimes if you have a limit on space. If you're single, you just bought your own house, you might have spare bedrooms. And, we ran into that quite a few times over the years, where customers would come in and, the guy said, we call him Santa Claus. I'm not going to use names. I'm going to avoid using websites or companies and stuff. So I'm just going to try to talk general. So Santa Claus, when I worked for my friend Mark, after I closed my store, I worked at his store, and I saw more stuff than ever. So Santa Claus had 4 bedrooms, one for him and his wife, and he was older. He was probably in his 50s. And the other 3 bedrooms, he said, were filled with toys. And the stuff he brought in is incredible. And he would literally go from toy store to toy store in the 80s and the 90s and just buy out clearance stuff. So he'd come in with Ghostbusters, the Firehouse sealed, the Ecto one sealed, all the figures sealed, and he'd have one thing after another, and it was incredible. And it was great, Pee Wee Playhouse and Giant Cherry and things like that. So investing is tougher because you usually will want to pick specific high ticket items, but not everybody has a lot of money. It's like, oh, here's $1,000 comic book. Who wants to spend $1,000 on a comic book? Your average person doesn't. I know I have friends and coworkers and stuff that can drop $1,000 like it's nothing, but your average person can't. So, usually the investing price would usually be from like $50 to a few hundred. If you're investing. What turns into, and I always say it's like a mix, a mingle of the collector investing. I didn't plan on investing. I was just buying stuff. But once you start acquiring duplicates of things, you're like, okay, I might as well sell it and then I could buy more stuff for myself. But then you just, sometimes you find a lot of something. So I'll get into a video game. I need 1 or 2 video games. The guy's selling 25 of them. But the buy price is so good that, let me buy and keep, the extra 23. I'm just going to resell it and try to make money back on my investment. But investing, it depends on how you view it. Because I watched several videos. This is the reason why I actually did this video. That investing, investing is about turning over money. Sometimes it's short-term investments, sometimes it's long-term investments. So when you want to buy something like Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man 1, that's something that's long-term. Or it's actually could be short-term too, but that's a book with probably 99% chance is not going down over a 25, 30-year period. But, you sometimes acquire things. Say you buy a long box of comic books and you want to keep 20 of them. Now you got 250 extra books or something, and you paid $20 for the box. Well, it doesn't take much to turn that over and make a profit. And sometimes people laugh at me because I'll buy 100 of something or 500 of something, and I'll pay practically nothing, penny or two, and I get $1, $2, $3 each. Technically, that's an investment. And sometimes it's work. If you're going to invest, if you're going to collect, you are going to work. I don't care. So if you're doing really a lot, you might pick a few items, spend a few $1,000s, and then just let them sit. Okay, that's a quick investment. But if you are passionate and you want to, get into the collecting thing, you need to do your homework. And I've spent thousands and thousands, just in video games alone, I've spent thousands and thousands of hours. But, maybe like 25% of my life has been spent on collectibles. So, what you want to collect, that's up to you. Action figures, as a little kid, I had action figures. And right now, there's certain action figures that are super hot. A lot of 80s stuff, a lot of 90s stuff. And people don't realize, for me, 1990s, right before I opened my store and stuff, there was a flood of everything. Flood of comic books, flood of baseball cards and stuff. And then you had the market crash. The same thing with the video games. Floods of video games in 83, 84 caused the crash. And, it turns out that you can get stuff super, super cheap. But then, okay, 1990, 30 years ago, some of that stuff now is starting to rise in value. And, stuff you would find in a quarter box might be $5, $10 now. And if you purchase this stuff and you just threw it in a room and haven't touched it and it stayed in nice condition, you could probably make a pretty good chunk of money. So, since I just mentioned condition, condition usually will play an important role. Not always, because there are some things that are so valuable that, or don't exist in high condition, high grade condition. Um, Now you're going to have to settle for a lower grade, or if you don't have the money for that $20,000 Spider-Man, you might settle for a $3,000 Spider-Man. But don't be deterred by uh, condition, because even the lowest grade stuff, sometimes if it's valuable enough, you have an Action 1, Detective Comics 27, it doesn't matter what it is. You can have pieces, parts, pages, and you'll be making money if you can get it cheap enough. Because there's always people looking for lower grades just to fill in their collection. You got your collectors out there. Um, I had some collectors specifically would want good or below comic books. Sometimes there were collectors who just wanted coverless comic books. And again, you might not get much for them, but you probably didn't pay much for it. So you have your collectors, you have your investors. Um, Let me think where I wanted to go with this, or where I want to go next. Oh, the action figures. So the action figures right now are heating up. Video games are heating up. There's a lot of grading companies out there, and what that does is brings in. Sometimes it's a little disappointing, a little frustrating for the collector out there who've been collecting for 20, 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden the market shoots through the roof because of a few grading companies coming out and start grading cards or video games or comics or whatever. I mean, the comics grading has been around for 20 years, so that's not something new. But video games, there've been companies. Same thing with the action figures. But I don't know how serious things are with some of those other companies. I know with the new company for video games, like I said, I'm not mentioning any names. You have certain auction houses that are spotlighting this, and you're bringing in investors that have no clue and no real interest in the hobby. And that's why I said about getting frustrated, because they're driving up prices. And again, people think, oh, some people want to get out of there collecting just because of these investors. And maybe I'm never going to see those holy grails in the wild now. But, you take it as it comes. Okay. So the other thing about collecting, investing, uh, and this is more investment, is one, like I mentioned the condition, but second is age. Just because something is old does not mean it's worth something. It might be a couple of bucks. There's ancient coins, bronze coins that might be worth $2, but they might be 2,000 years old. So it doesn't, age does not necessarily mean valuable. And some non informative people, a lot of these antique dealers, you'll go to the antique store and you'll see, a batch of comic books and they have everything priced at $10. They don't even look at see, or they'll pull out a price guide and they don't care about condition. They'll be like, oh yeah, let's see, $10, and then it's worth two because it's got a nice crease down the middle or something. So, like I said, just because something's old doesn't mean it's valuable. Rarity, that's another thing. People think just because it's rare, oh, only 25 of these are made. That, again, does not necessarily mean there's going to be value to it. There are certain comic books that, especially nowadays, you got these retailer things. You buy 1,000, you get one. You buy 500, you get one. Or sometimes the companies, a lot of these little small press companies, come out with a comic book and then they'll have the regular, 500, 600, 800, whatever print run. And then, limited edition of 100, limited edition of 50, signed and numbered. Again, you saw it with QVC all the time, signed and numbered with certificates. And you see these comic books that, they're not necessarily, they pay, oh, I paid $25. I mean, I don't remember Death of Superman. Everybody thought they were going to put their kids through college from it. Millions of whatever copies of all the various, the covers and newsstands and the second prints, third prints, fourth prints. It was crazy. But if you pay something, and the big thing with investing, when do I sell? It's just like the stocks. Do you really know when you sell? That's not an easy task to come up with. Like, oh, when do you sell? Vintage, like I said, Spider-Man 1, you could hold it 10, 20 years, you'll probably make good money. But you try to figure out, um, do I hold something, say, for 2 years? If I pay $10 for an item, I buy a comic book for $10. If I wait 2 years, I can get $25 maybe. Or I can sell it for $15 next month. And can I take that $15, reinvest it, and make more than $25 in the 2 years? So that's what you have to weigh. Some people, like your portfolio, you buy gold and you just leave it there. You buy some stocks, you just leave it there. And if it reaches a certain point, then you decide to sell. TV shows help, cartoons help, first appearance of movie in a movie or something always help. So you're going to see rumors. Okay, there's a rumor that so and so just is going to come out with a TV show. So all of a sudden, the action figures of that character, the first appearance of that character, or limited series of those characters, or rare covers of that character, everything all of a sudden shoots through the roof. Well, something like that usually does not last. So when something is announced, there's a heating up period. And then where's that right time to sell? It's usually right before or right after the release. And then prices will slowly drop. So sometimes you're as a collector, you're afraid, oh man, I'm never going to get that again for that price. It's possible, but I'd probably say at least three out of four times the price is going to come down after the hype. And you can, get $100 for that one item and then pay 50 for it, 5 months later, a year later. If you're willing to take the chance. I own a lot of things that are in my collection that I particularly don't want to get rid of. Well, part of the reason because I have a ton of stuff, extra stuff I don't want that, I need to get rid of. So I'm going to pause it here. Think about what I want to cover, because I figure I'm probably going to have somewhere between 45, 50 episodes already planned on various collectibles and stuff. So I'm going to pause it here and then, reevaluate my thoughts and then come back. Okay. So going back to purchasing, why do people purchase? What would people purchase? Usually based on popularity, production, survivability. You have paper collectibles, they're not going to survive in harsh environments. They get wet, they get too dry, they tan. So certain items, certain collectibles can survive in some of the harshest environments, but most of them you need climate controlled, some type of climate control, and determine keeping in good condition. Popularity. I wanted to talk about popularity because it's in your face. Marvel superheroes, DC superheroes, certain TV shows, Walking Dead or something. And when it's in your face constantly, it's going to be popular. And the thing is I always came up with, there's always a collector for everything out there. You can have the worst items in the world, as some people laugh at me. One day I went to a Goodwill bargain bin, and you purchase based on weight. You pick it up and they throw it on the scale, and you're paying 50 cents a pound, $1 a pound or something. And I found what I originally thought were vomit bags for airlines. And when I looked at it, it was actually it's called Mark of the Devil. It was a movie rated V for violence. First movie rated V for violence came out, I believe, in 1970. And I paid $8. I got over 650 of them. And, people at work, a lot of these people, these are cool and stuff. I said, I'll give you for $1 each. So guess what? I made my money back almost instantly. And then I started selling them for $5, $10, buy 5, paid $30 or something online. And I'm already in a profit. I got 600 and something of them. So it doesn't really matter what I get for them. But it was an investment. It doesn't take up too much. I mean, a couple of boxes. I mean, think about the vomit bag when you're on an airplane. But again, they laugh at me. I'll save anything that has cartoon, animations, movies, TV shows or whatever. Some of the worst things. I wanted to bring up lottery tickets. Um, Something you think you'd never collect. There's actually a group called lotologists. This is real. I'm not making this up. So King Kong came out in the mid '90s at a re-release with Jack Black, and I was living right across from New York City at the time. And I went the last day. They had the premiere, the giant 40-foot blow up King Kong in Times Square, and they had a lottery called King Kong's a Millions. And so my wife and we went over there and wanted to see the giant blow up of King Kong. And we're like, I bought five entries into the King Kong Millions. And of course, we didn't win. And I went home and, 3 years passed or something like that. And I'm cleaning my desk and I found the King Kong Millions lottery tickets. I was about to throw it out. And then boom, light bulb again. There's a light bulb again. It's like the video games. King Kong. It says King Kong. You got King Kong collectors out there. And I'm like, and then all of a sudden, lottery. I'm like, oh, what do you do with lottery tickets? Well, you win, you hand it back to the retailer, and you get money. You lose, you rip it up and throw it away. So I said, oh, you know what? There you go. People throw things away. My mama threw them out. I hear the story all the time. I had so and so when I was a little kid, and my mother sold it at a garage sale or donated it to Goodwill or threw it out completely. So I'm thinking, okay, how many of these lottery tickets survived? And I started collecting lottery tickets, the scratch-offs, especially because why? They're colorful. I'll get into that in another video. But, the items that people throw away is probably the most valuable. They might have printed 1 million Action Comics ones, but how many survived today? You had the war and stuff with the recycling. So survivability was a big, big thing. Not necessarily production, because like I said, they made 1 million. You look at the Archie, early Golden Age Archies, it actually says, we printed 1 million of these or something. But again, how many survive? There's a Gerber photo guide that estimates survivability of these comic books. The other thing is when you're a kid and you grow up and you want to get back into it, it's like, oh, it's been 20, 25 years. Now it's been over 30 years since the Turtles cartoon and action figures, not the comics. Comics didn't, you had your collectors of comics, but when the cartoon came out, it was geared towards kids. So the comic book was serious. I loved it. And now you're talking over 30 years, start picking up. So what happens is the kids, sometimes you save them. Mom might not have thrown them out, but most likely as a kid, you opened it up, you played with it. And now you're going back and you call up, you see, you have this resurgence, this nostalgia one day and say, give your mom a call. Hey, Mom, do you still have my turtle figures? Yeah, they're up in the attic. They're down in the basement. So you go back to your parents' house, you pick up your box of action figures or baseball cards, whatever it is. And then you decide, okay, as a collector, you can turn around and say, okay, I'm going to sell them because they're worth money now, even loose. Things are open. That does not necessarily mean they're valueless. And that's the one thing that a lot of these videos from other people, these collectible, investing videos, push on you. Oh, you need the best condition. You need brand new sealed and stuff. The chances of getting some stuff sealed, especially older things, I'd say at least pre-1980. Because the 80s, mid-80s is when everybody started saving things in a package, but or bagging and boarding the comic book immediately. So, but you look at prior to 1980, unless there's warehouses of this stuff, which occasionally pop up, drops the price, and then eventually it just slowly climbs back up. I heard of Wacky Packs. They found certain series, Wacky Packages, from like the early 70s, 73, 74. That again dipped the price because they had, say 20 cases of them. I don't remember how many exactly, but it has, here's on the market, and all of a sudden, price plummets. It might cut down in half or whatever, but again, eventually, it builds back up. There's 8 billion people in this world. That's why people laugh at me. There's always a collector for everything out there, or anything out there. some of the worst things you think. Somebody's willing to pay for it. It might take you a long time, but with the internet, you have Craigslist, you have eBay, and all this other stuff. Um, you can you have the world at your fingertips. You don't have to advertise anymore in newspapers and things, and worry about so you're some local person coming to your house, and then okay, you have a limited audience. With the internet, you have a worldwide audience. And when I was at Mark's store, we actually had a Japanese dealer. He flew in from Japan. I don't know if it was once or twice a year, and he would pay full retail from our store. It's like, okay, we were happy, and he dropped $800, $1,000, because over in Japan, it was like he would get double whatever he was paying, so it didn't matter to him. And that's where sometimes rarity, regional rarity is true. If you're in, like at me, I grew up right out 10 minutes outside Giant Stadium. You would find Giant stuff, Jets, the Devils when they moved there before they left, the Nets before they left. You would find tons of that memorabilia around there because it's regional. You had New York Yankees, you had New York Mets, you had the Rangers, the Islanders, all the New York teams. You would find that stuff like crazy. But then, you come down and you want to sell it in California, you go to Florida or something. You're not going to find too many people. Well, in Florida you might, because you have a lot of retirees from other places. But a lot of times you won't find as vast an audience. But again, the internet just brings this whole huge, customer base that you never had before. So what else would drive you to collect or invest? There's certain things that people are always looking for. Errors. There's something wrong with the product that came out, and the error itself is not worth anything. They made 1 million of it. It's not worth anything. If they correct it, that's where something is either going to be worth more or less. It depends on how early they catch the error. So if they print 80% of the run and then say, oh, there's an error, and then they correct the other 20% of the run, that means the corrected version is going to be rarer than the error version. And, people need to realize that if you're thinking about investing. If as a collector, you might just want one of each. So, it doesn't matter to you. But as an investor, you're like, okay, what has the most potential? Sometimes it's already seen its rise in value, and it's not going to move much. There are plenty of things out there that have peaked. And when I get into the individual videos on specific collectibles, I'm going to mention that, because every collectible has a holy grail, probably several holy grails, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be valuable. So a holy grail for a coloring book might be worth $1,000. There's no $1 million Action Comics and coloring books. There's no $1 million lunchbox. There's things like that. You're going to find different areas where you can invest, but you're not going to make a fortune unless you buy quantity. But again, you could just buy stocks if you want. You have money to blow. To me, usually those people don't care what they're buying. They usually don't care what they're paying, because some newer like video games that just got graded. There was Spider-Man. The first one sold for $9,000, then it went for $5,000. Now they're down to under $2,000. Why? Because people are realizing there's a lot out there. But it's always that first one. I remember when I wasn't going to mention names, so we won't. But when the comic grading came into in place, early on, people were like, oh yeah, it's the first 10.0, it's the first 9.8 or something, and they asked astronomical prices, and people didn't realize they just pay these high prices on things. The other thing is sometimes things are recalled. All right, items are recalled for one reason or another. Maybe they're politically incorrect, use that term. There was a corn pop cereal box where they put one corn pop darker than the others or something, and one of the character little drawings on the back of the box. And there's sometimes a voluntary recall, sometimes mandatory. I don't know how they enforce mandatory. They can say, okay, we'll give you try to do an incentive where you actually get more stuff instead of a one-on-one trading. Um, but something's recalled. Depends on how much is still out there. It's good. Could be good investing. And as a collector, hey, I got to have that, one item that I don't have in my collection. Variations. That is a big thing right now, especially with comic books. They're just non-stop. Every month, every book has 2, 3, 4, 5 covers. And we thought, I didn't think this would last. It's still sort of lasting. I think some people are getting fed up, but back in late 80s to 90s, several of the major companies, even some of the independents, they would make multiple covers, and people were getting fed up with it. And we that might have been part of the reason, besides the tremendous print runs, of why things were crashing. But I heard when I had my customers, a lot of them complained, oh, I don't feel like paying $2.50, $2, I think was the cover price in the 90s, for 3 different covers or something, 4 different covers. And nowadays it's like, see some of these, like Star Wars Marvel, I think had 110 or something variations or something. It's nuts, because again, you got to think of, it's going to take up a lot of room. Do I want one? Maybe pick, a lot of times as a collector, you just want to pick those few that you like. These are nice. You don't care about certain artists that you don't like their style, or those sketch covers, unless you plan on getting a sketch. It's a plain white cover with the logo most of the times. And like, yeah, I'm not going to bother with that. Something's discontinued. All right. That's a big thing. And right now, again, the politically incorrect things, Land O'Lakes butter. They got rid of the little Native American girl on the package. They were getting rid of Uncle Ben, Aunt Jemima, things. And I find it a little ridiculous, but it's happened many years, especially with the African Americans, the way they were portrayed in the 20s, 30s, 40s, that a lot of that stuff, was changed over time. So there's a market for it. Vesting wise, I'm not too sure. So some of the topics that I'm going to be covering in future videos, like I said, I'm starting off at least 2. I don't know about 3, but I'm going to try to do vintage video games. I don't know much about new games. They're coming out with so many systems, or how many games and stuff for each system. 800 games, 1,000 games, 600 games. So there's a lot out there. And then you got your Wii and Wii Fit and or whatever these things are. I actually don't know very little about a lot of these. My thing was the vintage video games. I actually got into Nintendo more by accident. I wasn't even going to bother with Nintendo. And then I wasn't even going to bother with a lot of the 90s stuff. But I have a few 90s systems, but most of the time I'm 70s, 80s. Second thing, again, it's going to take 2, 3, 4 videos. I'm going to deal with comic books. Even modern, go from Golden Age, Silver Age, all the Bronze Age, Copper Age. They keep naming all these different ages, but there's a collectability in each of those sections, and I'm going to cover specifics. Investing, usually people would know the most logical things to buy in comic books, but again, I'm going to pitch my suggestions, and we'll go from there. Trading cards. I'm going to be covering sports cards, non-sports cards, collectible card games. Everybody's with the Magic the Gathering, the Pokemon right now. Stuff's being graded, and certain companies have been grading cards for years. But again, now you have an audience for specific things, and again, you have investors buying the $50,000 card or something, and these are people who have no interest usually whatsoever in the hobby. They just want to buy that item, pay 50 grand, and somewhere along the line get 75 grand or 100,000 or something. And again, I say it's a little frustrating. Action figures. I brought up the Ninja Turtles and things, but I'm going to go back to literally G.I. Joe. I'm going to count G.I. Joe from the 60s as an action figure, not a doll. even though it was a doll geared for boys, and then go through the 70s, a lot of the action figures and Amigo dolls, which I'm also going to consider action figures, and we'll go over some things with that. Superheroes. There's gonna be a lot of cross collectability in these categories. So you have comic books and you have superheroes, but I'm gonna stay away from, if I've already covered it or it has its own little category. I'm gonna just try to keep um, when I mention superheroes, I'm gonna just like mention things. Some of again you think aren't collectible, but you always have those people out there. There's price guides on some of these things. You get a Star Wars price guide that goes, oh, here's bed sheets and curtains and coloring books and whatever it is. So superheroes, I'm gonna give its own category. Um, Again, a few episodes probably, but cartoons, TV shows, movies, and I'm going to throw in plays, like, play on stage, which might also cover something that might not necessarily. Sometimes they begin as a play and they make a movie out of the play and things like that. So I'm going to, cover collectibles with that. Sci-fi, science fiction, I'm giving its own categories. Again, cross collectability. It's a TV show. So things like sci-fi, Star Wars, of course, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, maybe, other sci-fi things that have been on, even things that might not you think is like Stargate or some of the movies I might call Black Hole, you know, or maybe Gremlins, so something in there that could be science fiction, not necessarily total, futuristic sci-fi. Um, Disney. That's probably going to be a couple episodes in itself, because there's so much with Disney, and I might just cover certain characters. You got your princess line, Mickey Mouse, of course, Donald Duck. So Disney will have its own section. Sports memorabilia. I'm going outside the trading cards, because trading cards, like I said, cover sports cards and stuff. But sports memorabilia, not necessarily autographs. But other things, maybe jerseys, uh, bats, or so, maybe other things like statues or photos, whatever I can come up with in general. Again, what's collectible versus investing. Role playing. This is actually something I think is growing, because a lot of people loved, and of course the famous one, Dungeons and Dragons. But there's some role playing items, especially Dungeons and Dragons. But a lot of role playing came out in the '80s, and you'll see a variety of role playing games. And you go online again, collecting. You might want all these different, the modules, the rule books, and things like that. But I'm also going to cover magazines, like Dragon magazines and stuff. Most of the magazines I'll probably cover in the comic book section. But if it's role playing related, even certain items, because Dungeons and Dragons itself, there's a lot more out there besides the role playing game. So I have a board game of Dungeons and Dragons. I have a color form set of Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, I think I have that sealed. And you go out and I purchased this stuff 25 years ago, and now I'm looking at online prices, and sometimes I paid $5 or $10 or whatever it is, and you're looking at it's 100, 150, $200. So did I intend to invest in that? No, I liked it. So, but I considered it a bonus, and that's what we're going to talk about: collecting and investing. If you're a collector and you can make money on your stuff in the future, consider that a bonus. They always said, buy to enjoy, not to make money on. It's like you go watch a movie in the movie theater, you spend $25 between popcorn and candy and stuff for one person, and you have nothing to return in your investment. You go to Red Lobster and you drop $35 on, surf and turf or something. You have nothing to return on the investment. So, don't be disappointed if your items are not worth anything. And sometimes, again, it might take another 20 years for something to come around. A lot of things are cyclical. So, as a little kid, they enjoy it. And then 20 years, 25 years later, they grow up, they get a job, they enjoy it. And then sometimes they get rid of it. And then somewhere down the road, it becomes hot again. They relaunch. A lot of times they're relaunching things. Sometimes it's not for the good, like the Ghostbusters. But it's if it's brought back, some things are just steady. Star Wars has literally been steady. But you have other things that people forget about, and then 20 years later, hey, we're going to relaunch this. And sometimes it's for the good, sometimes it's for the bad. Another category I'm going to be doing is transportation, and that'll be covering like trains. And I'm going to get into trains, but trains have seen their life and stuff, because a lot of kids don't see trains that often. That was a big thing, train transportation, and uh, bringing goods from one end of the country to the other. Cars, Matchbox cars. I'm going to get into more like toys stuff, the toys of trains, cars, airplanes, and things like that, versus real cars and stuff. I'm not going to try to cover anything real life. So I'm not going to cover, Ferraris and things and antique furniture, and because that stuff's been done. And to me, that's not collectible, even though it is, but it's usually by people with a lot of money. But I'd rather stick with something that you could have had as a child, and now as an adult, you either want to invest in, or you've been collecting, or maybe go back collecting. Your mom might have had, like I said, all your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys. And as an adult, you say, okay, I want to finish what I had loose, or maybe I want to start putting money into getting things sealed. And again, it depends on your extra income and how you want to do it. The other thing I'm going to do is toys in general. Just to give you an idea, things like Fisher Price or Weebles, stuff that you would play with as a kid and maybe want as an adult, just for that nostalgia. And again, certain categories are not going to have super expensive items to invest in. What else did I have? Board games, haha. Something I've been avidly collecting. I have a lot of my board games from when I was a kid. My mother didn't have a tendency of throwing things out on us, unless they look broken. And I'm going to actually get into that too. Certain items that are broken, one, could be repaired, or two, uh, actually, people want that because they're so rare, even broken. It's like the parts again with Action Comics 1. Just because it's ripped apart or you're missing 4 pages out of it doesn't mean it's not worth something. So, board games, I had a lot when I was a kid, and as I saw them, especially when I got into the Atari and stuff, I discovered there were video game board games. So there's a Donkey Kong board game, there's a Cubert board game, there's a Pac-Man board game. So I started buying some board games, and then again, you start seeing things. One, when you had as a little kid, or two, certain games that are re-released. And again, I'll go into board games, but including board games, I'm going to put some card games that are not collectible card games, like playing games where you would go head to head or something, but something more like they were released, and not necessarily just playing cards, 52 card deck, but card games like, say, Man from Uncle has a card game, or some of the cartoons might have a card game. Bookshelf games. I got into those too. It was more for adults. They would give, but literally they would have a slipcase. You could put it right on your bookshelf and look nice. And I discovered there's a couple of companies out there. Strategy games. Sometimes you have those sports games like Stratomatic and stuff. A lot of stuff with strategy, a lot of numbers, again, geared towards adults. And I'm also going to throw in some puzzles. And I'm talking about jigsaw puzzles. For the most part, I guess if I come up with something else, but jigsaw puzzles are pretty good to categorize with that. I considered stamps, since I actually got into stamps that was probably the first collectible that I actually was saving. Like I said, I was like 11 years old. So stamps is a considerable thing. I don't know much about coins, so I'm probably not going to get into coins at all. So stamps, possibility. Another category is, I'm going to call this miscellaneous, and this is going to be all, it depends, at 1 or 2 episodes, I'm not too sure. Things like lunch boxes, Viewmaster, children's books. My wife is heavily into children's books. Past few years since we moved and stuff, we have to actually unpack and categorize and shelve and things, but take inventory. Always take an inventory, because a lot of times if you don't have an inventory, you might be buying duplicates, and if you're on a limited budget, you don't want duplicates. unless of course it turns out they're hot and you can make some money on it. Um, but yeah, so you will have like a miscellaneous things, coloring books, like I mentioned. I'll probably throw in that. Um, Another category I'm probably going to cover: military and Western collectibles. And again, cross collectibles. So if I remember when I was a little kid, the Marx toys. They were plastic figures, and I've seen knockoffs of them all the time. Um, but the Marx toys, they were about maybe 7, 8 inches, like 7 inches tall, and it'd be a cowboy. I remember there being spacemen and stuff, but they had army men and stuff, and that's just like one little category. You had, I remember there were also play sets. You'll see some of those. I'll discuss that again, like Fort Apache and stuff. And again, variations, first release, second release, was it in a cardboard box, was it in the metal things? So there's a lot out there. And again, like I said, you're going to have to do work and choose what you want to invest in if you're an investor. Collector, most likely you've already gotten into some stuff, but maybe you'll decide you want to try to collect something based on one of my videos. And another category is hot for certain things, but again, you don't know what is good and what is not. I'm going to talk about holidays. You have, especially Halloween. Halloween is probably more popular than Christmas, but there's a lot of holiday stuff out there. Again, there's a lot of vintage things out there that again, might not be worth a lot of money. Sometimes it is. It's like, you get these little Halloween decorations or noisemakers or something, and you wouldn't think they would be worth it. Oh, who wants that and stuff? And then you see them in antique stores, and they're asking $50 to $100 for each item. And just one more category I'm gonna talk about, but I'm gonna have others specifically, but advertising. And you see it on these TV shows all the time. They buy these signs and things, or whatever it is, promo for any product out there that usually has characters. Oh, I'm going to include that, but I'll probably give a separate episode for fast food advertising, because a lot of fast food places have always been geared towards kids. So I'll discuss that in future episodes. So if you have any questions, post it at the bottom. Hopefully you'll subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future.